The Greystone Tower rose solitary on the plains of Valmoor, its narrow windows blinking with the orange light of candles that never went out. Inside it, Eryn Ashford, a young woman with disheveled brown hair and always attentive amber eyes, watched the golden runes float in the air before her. They were simple arcane symbols, basic exercises that any second-year apprentice should master effortlessly. But for Eryn, each attempt was a battle against something invisible that dwelt within her. She extended her right hand, murmuring the precise words of the prestidigitation cantrip, a trick spell so elementary that even half-elf children performed it to impress visitors. The rune should glow, stabilize, and then disappear in a cascade of harmless sparks. Instead, the golden light trembled, grew uncontrollably, and exploded in a wave of energy that hurled books, scrolls, and ink bottles across the room. Eryn was thrown backward, striking the stone wall with an impact that drove the air from her lungs. Again, she murmured, her voice hoarse as she rose unsteadily. Her mentor, Master Aldrich Thornwell, a human with a graying beard and dark blue robes embroidered with silver stars, entered the room without knocking. His eyes, normally kind, carried a concern he tried to disguise with professional severity. "That's the 4th time this week, Eryn. You need to find balance. Magic isn't brute force. It's harmony between intention and execution." Eryn brushed the dust from her clothes, tasting the metallic flavor of blood in her mouth. She knew Aldrich was right, but the problem wasn't technique or lack of study. There was something different about her, something no grimoire or ancient scroll mentioned. Whenever she tried to conjure, she felt a strange presence, not threatening, but vast and ancient, reacting within her own being, as if her magic wasn't entirely her own. "Master, I feel as if there's something else trying to manifest." "It's not just my will guiding the spell," Aldrich frowned, crossing his arms. He walked to the window, observing the plain where winds stirred fields of golden wheat beneath the twilight sky. "There are ancient bloodlines, Eryn. Families whose blood carries echoes of forgotten pacts, of powers that transcend traditional magic. But you were found at 3 years old, wandering alone in the ruins of Kaelthar. We have no records of your parents or any lineage." Eryn swallowed hard. The ruins of Kaelthar were a forbidden place, shrouded in legends about an extinct civilization that mastered magics considered heretical by the Arcane Academy. Few ventured there, even fewer returned. What if my magic comes from there, from the ruins?" Aldrich turned slowly, his penetrating gaze fixed on her. "Then you carry a greater burden than we imagined. And we need to discover what it is, before it consumes you." That night, Eryn couldn't sleep. Lying in her narrow bed in the tower room, she watched shadows dance on the ceiling, projected by the trembling light of a single candle. Her thoughts returned repeatedly to Aldrich's words, "Before it consumes you." She extended her hand in the darkness, murmuring the words of prestidigitation again. This time the magic didn't explode. Instead, small bluish flames appeared around her fingers, cold as ice, pulsing in a rhythm that seemed to echo her own heartbeat. And then, for the first time, she heard it, a voice not in words but in sensations, ancient, patient, and waiting. The journey to the ruins of Kaelthar would take 3 days on horseback, crossing the iron fields, where ancient battles between kingdoms had left the soil stained with rust and memories. Aldrich didn't allow Eryn to go alone, insisting she take company. That's how she met Kael Ironfist, a dwarven warrior with a braided red beard and moss-green eyes that sparkled with constant humor even in the face of danger. "Cursed ruins, uncontrolled apprentices, and a cranky old wizard paying me to babysit," Kael commented, adjusting the battle axe on his back as he mounted a sturdy pony. "I can't wait to see how badly this ends." Eryn, mounted on a nervous brown horse, rolled her eyes but couldn't contain a slight smile. There was something comforting about Kael's irreverence, a lightness that contrasted with the gravity Aldrich always imposed. "You don't have to come if you don't want to. I can manage on my own." Kael let out a hoarse laugh. "Of course you can. Just like you can blow up an entire room trying to light a candle." "No, girl, someone needs to make sure you don't disintegrate your own head." Despite the provocation, Eryn noticed there was genuine respect in Kael's tone. He didn't treat her like a child or an aberration, but as a traveling companion. That was rare. Since her magical failures began, many at the Academy had come to view her with a mixture of pity and fear. On the 2nd day of travel, while camping by the edge of a crystalline stream, Kael revealed more about himself. He wasn't just a mercenary warrior. He had been, years ago, a guardian of the Iron Mountains, protecting his clan from subterranean threats. But a tragedy, which he didn't detail, had driven him from home. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't facing monsters, Eryn, it's facing what's inside us. The demons we carry, he said, stoking the fire with a stick. And it seems you're carrying something big. Literally and figuratively. Eryn stared at the flames, mesmerized by their undulating movement. She wanted to tell Kael about the voice she'd heard, about the sensation that her magic wasn't just hers. But the words failed. How could she explain something she herself didn't understand? Have you ever felt like you don't belong where you are? She asked softly. Kael nodded slowly. Every day. But it's in those moments we discover who we really are. Not by what we inherit, but by what we choose to do. That answer resonated deeply with Eryn. Perhaps, regardless of the origin of her magic, she could choose how to use it. On the morning of the third day, the ruins of Kaelthar appeared on the horizon. White stone structures, partially covered with vines and moss, rose like skeletons of a glorious past. Gothic arches, broken columns, and staircases leading nowhere created a silent and haunted labyrinth. The air there was different, denser, charged with residual magic that made skin tingle. Eryn dismounted, feeling an invisible pull guiding her toward the center of the ruins. Kael followed closely, axe already gripped, eyes alert for any movement. "This place gives me the creeps," he murmured. "And look, I've faced furious dragonlings in dark caves." As they advanced, Eryn noticed the ruins weren't deserted. Arcane symbols glowed faintly on the walls, reacting to her presence. And then she heard it again. The voice. Not in words, but in images. An elven woman with silver hair, wearing ceremonial robes, standing before a circle of runes. A ritual. A sacrifice. And power. Power beyond mortal comprehension, being sealed within something small, fragile, and human. Within her. The center of the ruins housed an underground chamber accessible by a spiral staircase covered with luminous symbols. Eryn descended first, each step echoing in an almost tangible silence. Kael followed her, his heavy breathing revealing the discomfort he rarely admitted. The chamber was vast, with a vaulted ceiling supported by pillars carved with figures of winged beings and intertwined serpents. In the center, there was a circle of runes identical to the one Eryn had seen in her visions. And floating above it, a translucent crystal pulsed with amber light, the same shade as her eyes. Eryn approached, unable to resist the magnetic attraction. When she touched the crystal, the world around her collapsed. She was no longer in the ruins. She was in a ceremonial hall lit by torches, surrounded by hooded figures. The elven woman with silver hair was there, but not as a distant memory. She was real, tangible, and looked directly at Eryn with eyes that mirrored her own. "You finally came," said the woman, her voice melodious and laden with sadness. "I knew that one day you would seek the truth. Who are you?" Eryn managed to articulate, her voice trembling. "I am Lyria, High Priestess of the Order of the Eternal Dawn, and I am your creator." The world seemed to spin beneath Eryn's feet. Creator? Not mother, not progenitor, but creator. Lyria extended her hand, and images flowed into Eryn's mind like a violent river. The Order of the Eternal Dawn wasn't a benign organization. They were mages who believed that arcane power should transcend mortal limitations, fusing divine and arcane magic into a single being. They created Eryn, not born but forged through ritual, to be a living receptacle for both forces. "You are an experiment, Eryn, a fusion of arcane magic and the touch of the divine. Your body was molded to contain powers no mortal should possess, but the ritual failed. The divine energy couldn't be completely controlled, and the order was destroyed by its own ambition. I hid you in the ruins, hoping that one day you would be strong enough to understand and control what dwells within you." Eryn felt nauseous. She wasn't anyone's daughter. She had no parents. She was an artifact, an arcane creation gone wrong. So, my magic will never be normal? Normal? Lyria smiled sadly. "You weren't made to be normal, child. You were made to be extraordinary. But this gift comes with a price. The divine energy within you isn't passive. It has a will of its own, memories of where it came from. If you don't learn to harmonize with it, it will consume you or consume the world around you." The vision began to fade. But before everything disappeared, Lyria whispered. Balance isn't in controlling the magic, but in accepting what you are. Only then will you be free. Eryn returned to the chamber with a scream, falling to her knees. Kael was at her side instantly, his hands firm on her shoulders. Hey, girl, what happened? Are you okay? She wasn't. Tears streamed down her face as the truth crushed her. She wasn't human, not completely. She was a construct, a failed attempt to fuse powers that should never coexist. But as she cried, something changed within her. The voice that always whispered in her magic wasn't threatening. It was a part of her, waiting to be accepted. The journey back to Aldrich's tower was silent. Kael respected Eryn's space but remained close, a comforting presence that didn't demand words. He didn't ask what she'd seen, and she was grateful for that. When they arrived, Aldrich was waiting for them with an expression of deep concern. He watched Eryn dismount and walk toward him, shoulders hunched under the weight of newly acquired knowledge. You discovered it, said Aldrich, not as a question but as a statement. Eryn nodded. I wasn't born, I was created. An experiment. A fusion of arcane and divine magic that went wrong. Aldrich closed his eyes for a moment, as if processing that required all his strength. I suspected. Your magical patterns never made sense within traditional paradigms, but I couldn't be certain. And now? Eryn's voice sounded fragile. How do I control something that was never meant to be controlled? Aldrich walked up to her, placing his hands on her shoulders with gentle firmness. Perhaps the answer isn't control, but acceptance. You're not an object, Eryn. It doesn't matter how you were created. You think, feel, choose. That makes you as real as any of us. And perhaps your magic doesn't need to be tamed, but understood. Those words echoed Lyria's. Accept what you are. That night, Eryn returned to the practice chamber. This time she didn't try to force the magic to obey. Instead, she closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and for the first time, truly listened to the voice within her. It wasn't a separate entity. It was ancestral memory, a residual consciousness of the divine that had been woven into her being. She extended her hand and murmured the prestidigitation incantation again. But instead of imposing will, she asked the arcane magic and the divine essence to work together, in harmony. The runes appeared, golden and bluish, intertwining in a perfect dance. There was no explosion. There was no chaos. Just soft light, controlled, flowing from her fingers like crystalline water. Kael, watching from the doorway, nodded approvingly. Now that's real magic, girl. Aldrich entered shortly after, his face illuminated by a rare smile. You found balance. Eryn smiled, tears shining in her eyes, but not from sadness. For the first time, she didn't fear her own magic. She understood it, and more importantly, she accepted it. In the following months, Eryn continued her studies, but now with a new approach. She didn't try to fit into traditional molds of arcane magic. Instead, she explored the uniqueness of her existence, learning spells that fused the arcane and divine, healing wounds with magical energy, protecting allies with shields that glowed with sacred light, and conjuring flames that purified instead of destroyed. The Arcane Academy, initially skeptical, came to recognize her potential. Some feared her. Others admired her. But Eryn learned not to seek external validation. She knew who she was. Not a failure, not an experiment without purpose, but an apprentice who had discovered the truth about her own magic and chosen to embrace it. One afternoon, while practicing in the tower courtyard, Kael approached, carrying a wineskin of dwarven wine. To celebrate, he said, offering her a mug. You're no longer the girl who blows up rooms. Now you're the girl who can blow up rooms on purpose. Eryn laughed, accepting the drink. And you're still the dwarf who pretends to be rude but is incapable of abandoning those who need help. Kael shrugged. But there was a genuine smile beneath the red beard. We're all constructs, one way or another. The difference is you had the courage to look inside and accept what you found. As the sun set over Valmoor, painting the sky orange and purple, Eryn watched the golden plain stretch to the horizon. She didn't know what the future held. But she knew that, for the first time, she wasn't afraid of it. Because the truth about her magic wasn't that it was different, dangerous, or wrong. It was that it was hers, unique, powerful, and above all, free. And that Eryn thought was more magical than any spell. 6 months had passed since Eryn returned from the ruins of Kaelthar. Spring had come to Valmoor, bringing with it the perfume of wildflowers that dotted the fields in colorful carpets. Aldrich's tower remained solitary on the plain, but now it seemed less isolated, perhaps because Eryn finally felt she belonged to something, even if that something was indefinable. She was in her room, organizing scrolls and some belongings in a worn leather backpack. On the table, a detailed map of the continent lay open, with notes in the margins in her careful handwriting. Circles marked 3 distinct locations: the ethereal mountains to the north, where they said monasteries of monks who studied the fusion between body and divinity existed; the Shattered Isles to the east, home to druids who understood primordial magics from before civilization itself; and to the south, the Library of Mirrors, an arcane repository where forbidden knowledge was guarded by scholars who defied established dogmas. Still deciding which path to follow? Aldrich's voice made her look up. The old wizard was leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, but his gaze was gentle. There was pride there, mixed with something Eryn took a moment to identify: melancholy. "It's not about choosing one path," Eryn replied, carefully folding the map. "It's about recognizing that I need to walk all of them, eventually. There's so much I still don't understand about what I am." Lareya gave me answers, but they generated dozens of new questions. Aldrich nodded, approaching and observing the organized belongings. "The search for knowledge is infinite, Eryn. But don't forget that wisdom also lies in knowing when to stop searching and start living." "I know," she said, smiling slightly. "But I feel my existence has a greater purpose. If I was created to unite the arcane and divine, perhaps there's a reason beyond the Order's ambition. Maybe I can help others who, like me, don't fit traditional molds. Rejected wizards, clerics who lost their faith, sorcerers whose power frightens them. There are so many who suffer from not understanding what they are." Aldrich placed his hand on her shoulder, a paternal gesture that warmed Eryn's heart. "You've always been more than an apprentice to me, you know? You were proof that even in the most unlikely creations there are sparks of something extraordinary. Go, explore, learn. But remember, you'll always have a home here, if you need it." Eryn hugged her mentor, feeling the strength and fragility of this man who had taken her in when she was nothing but a confused child with dangerous powers. "Thank you, Master, for everything." In the tower courtyard, Kael Ironfist waited beside his pony, adjusting the straps of new armor, a gift from Aldrich, forged by dwarven artisans from the Iron Mountains. The gleaming metal had etched runes that glowed softly in the sunlight. "I thought you'd go back to your clan," said Eryn, approaching with her backpack on her back and the staff Aldrich had given her as a symbol of her graduation. Kael shrugged, but the mischievous smile was unmistakable. "I will go back, someday. But that talk of yours about helping those who don't fit in made me think. I don't fit there anymore either. I've changed. And maybe it's time to discover who I am now, away from the clan's expectations. Besides," he winked, "someone needs to make sure you don't accidentally blow up a sacred mountain or something." Eryn laughed, shaking her head. "So, it's decided? We go together? For a while, at least. The road is long and good company makes all the difference. Besides, you still owe me some stories about those visions you had in the ruins. And I have stories about drunk dragons you won't believe." They mounted their respective animals, heading toward the tower gate. Aldrich watched them from the upper balcony, waving discreetly. Eryn returned the gesture, etching that image in her memory. As they rode across the plain, leaving the tower behind, Eryn felt a mixture of apprehension and excitement. The world was vast, filled with mysteries, dangers, and possibilities. She didn't know what she would find in the ethereal mountains, or if the druids of the Shattered Isles would accept her. She wasn't certain if the Library of Mirrors held the answers she sought. But she knew one thing with absolute clarity: she was no longer running from herself. She was going to meet who she could become. Kael interrupted her thoughts with a loud laugh. "Hey, Eryn. I bet 10 gold coins we find trouble before sunset. I wouldn't bet against you." "Kael, trouble seems to find us without us needing to look for it. Exactly why life is interesting." "Girl." As Aldrich's tower disappeared on the horizon, Eryn looked ahead, where the road forked in countless directions. Each one led to an uncertain future, filled with challenges, discoveries, and perhaps redemption. She touched the translucent crystal she now wore on a cord around her neck, a fragment of the crystal in the ruins, which pulsed gently in sync with her heartbeat. Within it, she could feel Lyria's silent presence, not as a threatening shadow, but as a reminder that even the most unlikely creations could find meaning. "Where do we go first?" asked Kael, adjusting the reins. Eryn smiled, looking at the mental map she had drawn during months of study. "North, the ethereal mountains. There's someone there who, according to the texts, managed to transcend the limitations of his own nature. Maybe he can teach me something about balance. Frozen mountains, silent monks, and probably creatures trying to kill us." "Perfect. You said you liked adventure. And I do. I was just confirming we chose the most dangerous option." As always, they laughed together, and the sound echoed across the empty plain, carried by the spring wind. The path ahead was long and uncertain. But Eryn Ashford, apprentice, experiment, arcane creation, and above all person, was ready to walk it. Not as someone seeking to fix what was broken, but as someone discovering that perhaps she had never been broken. Just singular. And in the vast world of Valmoor and beyond, there was space for singularities. There was space for her. "O destino desta historia, esta nas suas mas. Se voca acredita que o heroi não esta sozinho, dic su like. Se voca vaio o que os outros não viram, escreva sua teoria nas comentários. E se voca precisa saber o que acontece a seguir, inscreva-se. O próximo capítulo vai mudar tudo."